Good afternoon, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network, here live on Facebook for the second time in the same day. And there's a special reason why we're here for the second time. As you know, I'm a sales coach and trainer. I founded the Sales Pro Network to elevate the profession of sales. It's a place where you can come and share your successes, your challenges, get amazing coaching from people like myself and most of my competitors. And every Friday, normally at 10 a.m., we have a live guest with someone who can add value to the profession of sales. And today's, I promise you, is no exception. The reason we're doing this today at 2 o'clock is because this is certainly, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest celebrity we've had on this. And as far as I'm concerned, he's huge. The gentleman I'm about to introduce you to is a man who has dramatically influenced and changed my life. I've spent a lot of money and a heck of a lot of time sitting in rooms kind of like this, staring up at him with 300 to 500 other people as he shared his wisdom, his knowledge. And it's truly my pleasure, truly my pleasure to introduce you to one of my gurus, James Arthur Ray. Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Jeff, thank you for all your kind words. I really appreciate it. And it's great to see you again. It's been way too long.
Yeah, it's so great to see you, James. So James is a thought leader. I don't know how you describe yourself, but he's a thought leader who has extensively studied things like human behavior, quantum mechanics, and a whole host of other subjects which are regarding how can human beings live up to their potential? How can they be the best version of themselves? How can you be more successful, make more money, have greater health, and in essence, be the best person you can possibly be? Did I describe you correctly, James?
Well, it's a pretty tall order to live up to, Jeff. And you know, I think one of the things that maybe your audience will be interested in, excuse me, is that I started my career in sales at AT&T, and then I became a national sales trainer. So I owe a large debt of gratitude to AT&T, because eventually I ended up as a C-suite consultant at AT&T around cultural change initiatives. And I really didn't get into doing seminars and writing books and all that for the earliest part of my career. So I'm really excited to be able to join a professional like yourself and be able to talk about what I prefer to call influence, because some people think sales, probably not your audience, but a lot of people think sales is not a good moniker, which I disagree with, but influence seems to be a little bit more palatable for some people.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask you if you would to give us maybe the 2 or 3 minute version of what brought you up to the point where you were in front of these live audiences, helping people change their lives. And certainly you started in sales. Could you just share a little bit more about how you turned into the international guru that you were and are?
Yeah, well, I really don't see myself as a guru. I like to consider myself a guide, and I appreciate that. And I know, you know, I think in today's world, I would much prefer to be a guide. And the difference in my mind is that, and I've had the experience of being on the top of the world, on top of the mountain, and saying to large audiences, hey, come on up here. You know, the air is pristine and the view is gorgeous. And they're in the valley and they're going, I can't, James, you know, they're foreclosing on my house and I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage, and I'm going through a divorce. Oh, yes, you can. Come on, just come on up. The difference for me is that, given my history and what I've been through over the last decade and more, is that a guide is in the valley with someone and is climbing the mountain with them, and has climbed the mountain before possibly, and is able to kind of point out the pitfalls and say, hey, don't stumble on that, because I certainly did. And that's what I believe we need in today's world, is someone who's arm in arm with us, not standing up there going, oh, look at my watch and look at my house and look at my car and look how much money I make. And there's a lot of those out there, as you know. But really saying, hey, I'm dealing with the same stuff you're dealing with, and I'm dealing with it every single day. And here's what I've learned, and maybe it'll work for you as well. Now, that being said, I'll jump off from AT&T because I ended up as a C-suite consultant. So I really built my career in business, Jeff. And a lot of people don't know that. And yet, while I was in business at AT&T for 13 years, I was studying all kinds of things. You mentioned some of them. I mean, I studied all the great spiritual traditions. I've studied mysticism. I've studied quantum physics, biology, psychology, and business as well. And I was always looking for a synthesis. How do all of these things work together? And I had this deep-seated belief that they did, and I still do believe that. And so in 92, I left AT&T School of Business and started my own company as a business consultant at that time, only doing primarily culture change initiatives, which we still do to this day. And the culture is the underlying values, beliefs, assumptions, expectations of the individuals in a business and how that drives behavior. And so from there, then it started to unfold, and I started to do live events. And it's a funny situation, Jeff. Is the very first live event I ever did, I was coaching one of the top income earners in Herbalife at the time. And he said, "Hey, can you do a live event?" I said, "Well, sure I can." And he put 500 people in a room in Chicago, a hotel room in Chicago, in under a week. And I thought, man, I am off and running. Well, the next one, I thought this is what's going to be. Well, the next one, and for many years that followed, there were times where I'd show up in a room with AV expenses and room rental expenses and all these things, and there'd be 5 people in the room. And so I ended up having to cut a check to the hotel because we were upside down. So it was a long journey. And then I was almost ready to throw in the towel. In fact, in 2005, I went to Egypt, and I spent 2 weeks in the Sinai Peninsula following the path of the children of Israel as they left Egypt. And I was with the Bedouins, which are the nomadic tribes there. And I was ready. I was done. I was just done because I felt like it's just not working. And I had been invited to be a guest on this little film that no one knew anything about. And we didn't get paid for, by the way. And yet I just decided out of the goodness of my heart to contribute to that. And it ended up being called The Secret. Well, in 2006, right after I spent the night on Mount Sinai in Moses' cave, where they say he received the 10 Commandments. That's another story I could share someday. But when I came down, I felt renewed. And I thought, come on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get your game face on, let's go. Well, shortly thereafter, The Secret went gangbusters, as you'll recall. And my entire business exploded in a good way. And we started scrambling. I had to hire more people and get new phones and get a new office space and so on and so forth. And I was on Oprah twice and Larry King twice and the Today Show about once a month, every single month for multiple months running. And it was like way, way beyond anything I could have imagined. And I was incredibly blessed. And then that's kind of how I got to the peak. And if you want me to tell about how I went to the pit, I can tell that again, because I've been to the peak and I've been to the pit and everything in between. And I believe, because I lost everything externally in 2009, including 3 people that I love and care about. And that was the hardest hit, really. If you've ever lost anyone that you love and care about, you know how that feels. It was devastating. But then I lost my Inc. 500 company, which we had been awarded. I lost my home. I lost my life savings. It just didn't quit. It just kept going. And I eventually lost my liberty and went to prison for 2 years.
Yeah, I actually wasn't going to bring that up, James, but if you'd like to share that, please do.
Well, I think it's important because right now, Jeff, we live in very disruptive times, turbulent times, and so many people right now are hurting. And I'm here to tell you, I know pain. I really do. And my heart goes out to you. I'll never, ever minimize anyone's pain. And yet, what I can also promise you is that you can get through this. The human spirit never ceases to amaze at what we have inside of us when we recognize who we really are and what we're capable of. I mean, just to give you a perspective, in 2013, which is not what now, 8 years ago, I was standing in the desert of Arizona. I had just been released from prison. I was a physical wreck. I had periodontal disease. I'd lost 40 pounds. I didn't need to lose. I was homeless, literally homeless. I was alone, and I was $20 million in debt. Now, you know, I kind of joke and say, hey, you know, if you're broke today, and I'm not minimizing that, but broke looked good to me. I mean, it was, I had to get rid of $20 million of debt just to get to broke. And I was homeless and I was in horrible physical condition and I didn't know which way to turn. Well, now it's obvious I'm not homeless. I mean, my now wife, who I have the most amazing wife on the planet, and if you're married, you'd argue with me. Hopefully, I hope you would argue with me on that one. But I'm firmly convinced I have the most amazing woman on the planet, and I didn't even know her in 2013. We have a modest, you know, condo here in Henderson, Nevada. It's not the 7,500 square foot estate in Beverly Hills that I had at one point, but I don't care. I'm grateful to have had that. I don't need that anymore. I realize there's a lot more important things in life than that. And I'll just kind of sum this up with this. First of all, let me just remind you as a viewer today, whatever you are going through right now in these turbulent times, you've got a power within you that is greater than anything life can throw at you. And you just got to remember that. And you got to tap into that. And then the second thing I'll tell you that I've learned is that your true wealth is not what you have. Your true wealth is what you're left with when all you have is gone. That's what you're left with, is your true wealth. And so, you know, my strong advocacy, which I'm grateful that I have lived this principle for most of my days, is that the single most powerful investment you can make is in your own growth and development. And to the degree you develop that mental toughness and that emotional strength, then you'll weather this storm and you'll get through whatever life brings your way. And you'll be bigger, better, stronger, wiser, and hopefully more compassionate as a result.
Yeah. So I truly wasn't going to bring this up because I didn't know whether it was a sore spot for you, but you know, what you went through, horrific for you emotionally, I'm sure, and mentally. And then you spent, how many years in prison? Was it 3 years in prison?
It was 2 years. The state wanted 30. So, I mean, if you can imagine a 4-month trial, Jeff, with 30 years swinging as a pendulum in front of your eyes, I mean, talk about stress and talk about, I mean, it was really, really unfortunate. And let me just say this too. You know, because every time I talk about my situation, there are those out there who will go, well, what about the families of those who died? And I just want to address, you know, there's nothing that I say or nothing that I talk about with respect to my circumstances that would ever come close to even scratching the surface of someone who lost a loved one. Because I love the people that died too, but they weren't my blood family. And so I never, ever want to act as if that's not important. And here's the other thing. I don't know if you've read my latest book, The Business of Redemption, but in the book, first chapter, and I'll say it here again today, first chapter is titled, I Am Responsible. And did I intentionally hurt anyone? No. And anyone who knows me has to know that's true. And yet it was my event. It was my team. It was my choice to do what we now know to be a dangerous exercise. And so therefore, as the leader, I am responsible. And I am to this day. And that's a huge burden to bear. It really is. And yet that's the price of leadership. If you can't, you know, so many people want to talk about leadership. So many people want to talk about, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to build a big business. Okay, great. But let me just make sure you're going in with eyes wide open, because when you're the leader of a business, and something goes sideways, there's one person in the crosshairs. You can't throw your team under the bus. You can't blame the facility. You can't do any of that. You have to step up. And if you're not willing to step up, then you better stand down, because that's really the price of that. And it's a big price, Jeff. I carry it every day, and I will for the rest of my life.
I'm certain. So sitting in your audiences, and guys, you know, we're really talking to somebody who used to stand in an audience in front of 500 people at a time, who had paid substantial amounts of money, and he's used to being on the stage in the spotlight. And he did have this horrible event, and I watched everything that went on, and it certainly hurt me for the families that were there. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, I was actually considering being at that event, and you know, I have a certain experience of you, you know, of I hold you in a very high regard, and even though I knew that this was a business to you, I never once felt that it was just a business. Your care always came through. I hate to be corny about it, but I always felt the love from you, James, and I believe every word you're saying. My question is, you know, you went through some, again, not to minimize what the families went through,
Right.
the people who lost their lives, but you went through an incredibly horrific event. I spent a night in a jail one time for something stupid I did and was released the next morning. Those 9 hours were like hell. I can't imagine what it's like to be there for 2 years. So mindset is an incredibly important thing for sales people. How do you stay mentally strong in the face of such a huge obstacle when you know, did you get out on early behavior? Early on good behavior. So you knew it was going to be 2 years, but how do you go through 2 years of your life knowing every day I'm locked up and there's nothing I can do about it? Your life's really out of your control.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was horrific, and yet it also, you know, there's a law in this universe called the law of polarity, which every up has a down, every in has an out, every right has a left, every good has a bad, and so it was horrific, and yet it was also one of the most amazing times of my entire life. Now, it took me quite a while to get there. I spent the first month in solitary confinement right next to death row, and you know, I was in a 10 by 12 cell with a concrete slab and a mattress literally that thick that was stained with urine, and there was no windows, there was no books, there was no TV, there was no radio, there was certainly no cell phone. You know, there was nothing, just me and the four walls and God. And so I had to really process. And here's the quick answer, even though my answers typically aren't very quick, as you know, and I'm proving it again.
But about you, James, I could listen to you all day.
But the quick answer with that setup is you have to find meaning. And one of my great inspirations is Viktor Frankl. And I don't know if you've read Man's Search for Meaning,
of course,
but I had no idea when I read that book that I would ever come close, and I certainly was not in Auschwitz. You know, I know that, and yet I was in a really ugly, dirty, horrible place, and I had to find meaning. And I reflected back on Frankel's work, and I thought, you know, what can I make this mean for me? And how can I make this work for me? And it took me a while to get there. I mean, Jeff, I'll tell you straight up, I went through all the blame and I was angry at God. I was angry at the state. I was angry at the people who testified against me that I knew I spent hours with them attempting to help them in their life and their business. I was angry at people in the industry who disappeared like mist in the noonday sun. I was really, really pissed off. And yet, as I processed through that, and here's the one of the many great learnings, Jeff. And again, I talk my new book, The Business of Redemption, is kind of a life story / learnings adventure, if you will. And one of the things I learned is that if you will just be with whatever is, and boy, isn't this a great lesson for today with people on lockdown and people who have lost their jobs and having to wear masks and they maybe don't want to, and on and on and on, what we've all collectively experienced worldwide. in the last year, and still continuing, and we're not through it yet. If you can just be with what is and allow yourself to feel all the feelings that arise within you, what I learned very quickly is they'll pass. And the real gift I had in solitary confinement was there was nowhere to run. I mean, quite frankly, Jeff, if it were to happen like right now today, and I had some of those feelings and emotions, it'd be really easy. Just, let me pick this up and let me start scrolling, or let me see if I got some emails, or let me turn on the TV, or let me, I'm a voracious reader. So, let me dig into a book, and let me journal. I didn't have any of that. I had to just sit there with my feelings and emotions. And what I learned is, as I just allowed them to be, they passed, because everything in this world, Jeff, and this is something that a lot of people don't like, but everything in this world is transitory. It's not permanent, it's impermanent. And so to the degree that you can let go now and just be with what is, it will pass. And that's true of happiness and joy too. None of it lasts. You got to be happy all the time. Well, no one is happy all the time. If someone's happy all the time, they scare the hell out of me, because they're not a human being. They're an android. And the whole human experience is this whole plethora and this whole flow of these varying emotions. And to the degree we stuff them and try to avoid them and deny them, we literally create dysfunction in our lives. And I believe that well-meaning people in the personal performance leadership arena have created a lot of pathology by telling everyone you got to be positive all the time. All right. Well, sometimes you're just positively pissed. I mean, it's just the reality of life. And anyone who tells you they're not is just not being honest with you, or they're in denial. So I had to find meaning, and I had to find a process that would allow me to process so that I could come out. And that's like Viktor Frankl. I thought, man, when I get out of this, I'm going to have so much more compassion. I'm going to have so much more awareness. I'm going to have so much more experience than I ever had before. And I'd love to be able to develop some degree of mastery with that, and to be able to share that with people who need it. And who knew that we'd be going into a 2020 and the things that everyone are dealing with. So it's a gift. It really is. It's a gift wrapped in pain, but it's a gift nonetheless.
Got it. So yeah, actually read the Frankl book like 4 months ago for the first time, and it's hard to read. I mean, this guy went Auschwitz. I mean, what could be worse?
Yeah.
But his story about how mindset is really how he made it through, rather than so many people who didn't, is very encouraging. And you mentioned something earlier that I was going to bring up. I first learned of you when I saw the movie The Secret. And you were everywhere. I mean, you were on Oprah all the time, and Larry King. It was hard to get away from you. And it really opened my eyes up to what the whole thing was about, which is the law of attraction. Could you please explain that to people? What is the law of attraction, and how can salespeople use that to be more successful?
Well, yeah, let me debunk the law of attraction first to some degree, because if you saw me on Oprah and many of those venues you mentioned, then I was the guy who was reminding you that 60% of the word attraction is action. And it's action. And that's what a lot of people, unfortunately, the way the movie was produced, and those of us who contributed had nothing to do with that. And no disrespect to Rhonda Byrne. She's a good friend, and she was one of the few people who stood by my side through the whole meltdown. And she had a vision for the movie that kind of positioned it such that, and the book, that all you had to do is just kind of visualize something, and the bike's going to be on your front step. Well, how's that one working out for you? I mean, no, it's not. And if you sit around visualizing all day long, they'll come take your furniture away. Let's face it. So people ask me all the time, do you still believe in the law of attraction? Because I went through hell and back, and a lot of people were like, well, he didn't know anything about law of attraction, because if he did, he wouldn't have attracted this hellacious experience into his life. Well, not so fast, because that means that Moses didn't know anything about the laws of the universe. That means that Jesus didn't know anything. That means that Buddha didn't know anything. That means that Martin Luther King didn't know anything, and maybe they knew them unconsciously. Maybe they didn't know them consciously, but nonetheless, if you look at the greatest souls throughout history, do a brief perusal of history, the greatest souls have always experienced the greatest suffering. There's no exception to that, because suffering is salvation in a sense. And again, that's not a popular theory, but suffering peels away the layers of BS and gets you to the core of what's really important. And I know I'm not answering your question directly, but I'd love for us to have a broader understanding of the law of attraction. Is there a scientific law of attraction? Yes. And it's not nearly as simple as The Secret and a lot of people who talk about it make it out to be, because they basically say like attracts like. Well, that can't be right, because if like attracts like, then I wouldn't be married to a woman, and so which I am, and so there are nuances there that are more complex. Now, I also know that visualization works, and I do coach one-on-one coaching, and one of the gentlemen I'm coaching right now is an up-and-comer in the network marketing industry, and I have him visualizing his sales interactions, his influence interactions before he gets on Zoom or before he gets on the phone. Mental rehearsal. Go through it mentally over and over and over. Now, obviously, your prospect is not ever going to respond like you think they're going to respond exactly in your mental rehearsal. But mental rehearsal is very powerful, and that's visualizing. And yet, what I said in my last New York Times bestseller, Harmonic Wealth, is that you've got to go 3 for 3. Yeah. Who is that guy? Both of us had a lot more gray hair than we did, years ago. But nonetheless.
You still have hair. I got a lot more forehead. And by the way, I was married back then, so there's no argument. I'm divorced now. There's no argument about who has the better wife.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I say you've got to go 3 for 3. Your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions all must be firing in alignment. And if you look at any sales professional, or any professional for that matter, who's getting what they desire and deserve, they're going 3 for 3. They're thinking, they're visualizing, they've got their outcome and their objective, their intention. They've got their feelings there, and they've got their action, all congruent. And what I find consistently, Jeff, and that's the law of attraction right there. And what I find with sales professionals, and as I said, I began my career training sales professionals, is that so many of them are speaking all the right words, and yet the internal dialogue is going, they're not going to do it. They're not going to take it. Oh, any minute now, I'm going to lose this. Well, guess what? Quantum physics tells us every single thing in this universe is energy. That's not new age thinking. That's physics. And energy vibrates. It has a frequency. And so consequently, I don't care if you're on Zoom or on the phone, or if you're face to face, it doesn't matter. There's a frequency. Every word has a frequency. Every thought has a frequency. Every feeling has a frequency. And frequency doesn't lie. If you've ever had a situation where someone's saying all the right words, but you just don't quite get the feeling that you should trust them. Well, what you're picking up on is the frequency of that energy that's emanating from them. And so to use this universe from a physics standpoint, and let's put it into law of attraction, you've got to look at the 3 most powerful things: thoughts, feelings, and actions. And when those are in alignment, you're congruent and you're believable, and you're going to have great influence, because the person with the greatest congruence is always going to have the greatest influence.
Got it. So you keep beating me to my questions, which I love. So
it's called mind reading, Jeff. It's called mind reading.
that was the big issue I had with The Secret, the book and the movie, and What the Bleep Do We Know, which was another movie on the same subject. That it talked about that you can have anything you want if you just think the right thoughts and feel the right feelings. And I haven't studied this like you have, but it came to me that there's something missing here, and the missing is you've got to be in massive action. I could walk outside. Well, it stopped snowing, but if it's snowing, I can walk outside and stop snowing. It's going to stop snow. It's still going to snow until whatever's up there is ready to have it stop. And I could stand outside all day long saying $1 million is going to drop out of the sky. It hasn't happened yet. It's got to be that action, and that was the missing piece. But I do want to get to something you just mentioned, because as I said a couple of times, I've sat in seminar rooms with you many times, and you always get around to quantum mechanics or quantum physics. And I'll have to admit that sometimes in those conversations, I've gone, the fuck is James talking about? I'm just completely lost. And I'm not a stupid guy, but you really know this stuff. So that concept that everything is energy took me a while to wrap my head around. And you do a great job of explaining it. But even so, it's like a chair and I are really the same thing, just vibrating at different rates. Well, that's a tough one for me to figure out. But so because everything is energy and everything is interconnected, how can we use that as salespeople to be better at our jobs and help more people choose to do business with us? Since we're all, if everything is connected, chairs and me, then all people are connected too.
That's correct. I mean, what the modern science tells us, the single most agreed upon story of how the universe was created was a Big Bang. And even theologians now say, okay, God could have created with an explosion. God can do whatever God wants to do.
Yes, he can.
If he do I?
Yes, she can.
Yes, she can. So if she decided to create with an explosion, so what? I still can buy that. Well, and that came out of a singularity. Now think about this. Over 14 billion years ago, there was a singularity, and boom, the whole universe exploded out of this. Now, and including you, including me. Now, not the personality James Arthur Ray or the physicality that we would call Jeff Goldberg, but the essence of you was there, and me as well, and all of us. And so if we came out of that singularity, that means we're all connected, because we came from the same point of energy. And that's mind-boggling too. But what quantum mechanics tells us, it's called quantum entanglement. Once two particles are entangled, they stay constantly connected across all space and time. So now coming back to people of influence, you're already connected to your client or your prospect. Now, granted, the more interactivity you have with that person, the stronger the connection. And yet there's still a connection there. You're connected. All the money you ever want to make, you're already connected to it. All the results you want to create, you're already connected to it. All the clients and the prospects you want to have, you're already connected to it. And when you can get outside of the small-minded, third-dimensional lie that we've been programmed into, our senses tell us very, very limited amounts of what's really here. We live in about a 5% universe. According to physics, 95% of what exists is vibrating. Its a frequency is too fast for us to perceive it. And so if you can get your mind around that to some degree, then you can start to recognize that, hey, as I put down and build my funnel, for instance, and my list of prospects, those prospects, I'm already connected to them at some level. And so that doesn't mean it's strong yet. And the business that I want, it's already there at some level. And way more complex than we can get into in a quick Facebook live, because, you know, multiple universes come into this and multiple world theory comes into this. And I think maybe you attended Quantum Leap, where I went like deep into that stuff. And we still do that event it's on Zoom now in this climate. But nonetheless, when I can start to understand that there's more than I can touch, taste, and feel, or see, or hear, then I can start to operate from a higher perspective and a higher awareness. Now, I know that sounds kind of airy-fairy to some degree, and I'm the least airy-fairy guy on the planet, because when I understand the laws of the universe, now I got to come from that perspective and bring it into this perspective. And that means I have to move forward based upon where I'm going versus where I am. Most people do just the opposite. You know, they look at their book of clients and they go, "Oh man, I'm broke. You know, I'm doomed. I don't even know how I'm gonna pay the rent next month." Well, I would say to you, I get that, and I'm not going to minimize that. And yet next month isn't here yet. So why are you projecting yourself into next month and failing and bringing it back into now? That's called anxiety. Anxiety comes from projecting yourself into the future and failing and bringing it back and feeling bad about it now. Well, it's all imagination. So if you're going to use your imagination, why not project yourself into the future and succeed massively and come back and feel confident about that now and operate and live from that perspective? Now, that's a psychological component of this, but there's a real practical, and that's practical too, but let me even bring it down further, because here's the secret to making a huge business. And as you know, I built a $10 million annual business, Inc. 500 company. And so I have a little bit of street cred to talk about this. And here's the secret: forget about money. You know, I've made multiple millions of dollars, and I never was focused on the money. What you've got to focus on is the cause versus the effect. The money is the effect. The cause is the value that I provide to the world. And when you focus on providing value to the world, then the effect will come. It has to. You know, and that's a fundamental principle in all spiritual traditions as well as physics. As you give, you receive. When you put out tremendous value and you're not focused on me, you're focused on here's what I can do for the world. Here's how I'm contributing. Here's how I'm having an impact. You know, I like to say the new ROI is return on impact. And it's not return on investment. And I'm a businessman and I look at ROI, return on investment. Of course I do. And yet I also know I'm going to have a higher ROI, return on investment, when I have a higher impact. And if I can focus on providing value to the world, then I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to be more than okay. And I've proven that again this time. I told you just 8 years ago, I was $20 million in debt and homeless and alone. And now the debt is taken care of, and I have a home, and I'm doing what I love again. Is it at the same level as it once was? No, it's not. And will it ever be? I don't know. That's not up to me. That's up to God. I just continue to focus on how can I contribute? How can I provide more value? And to the degree I do that, then I'm going to attract more opportunities for me to provide value. And very practically, how's that happen? Well, I do this interview and someone goes, wow, that stuff's really powerful. Maybe I'm going to interview him, or maybe I want to reach out to him. And that's the real practical application of this, is if you just focus on providing value, then your business is going to thrive.
My philosophy exactly. You know, when I coach salespeople, I always talk about the come from, and I always point to my gut when I say that. You know, your come from has got to be service. It can't be, I need to make a commission, I need to close a deal because I got to pay the mortgage, or I got to make the child support payment, or anything like that. Nobody cares about that except you. And when you can put aside, because I've certainly been broke, not 20 million in debt, that's for sure. But I can't imagine that staggering amount. But I've been in times where I couldn't pay the rent, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and it's very challenging when you're finally in front of a prospect to not let that show through, because that need is there. And I say that, prospects can smell commission breath or need and greed like dogs smell fear. And it's all about, how can I serve you? Because that's how it comes back. And look, that's why I have this group, to keep giving and giving. And I know you do constantly. And I know I've said it before, but I've sat in your seminar rooms, and the reason that I kept coming back, and each one was more expensive than the last, a larger investment than the last, it was because, man, I got amazing value out of spending a day with James, 3 days with James, a week with James, and it's worth every penny, because there is a return on that impact or investment.
Yeah, and back in those days, they were 16-hour days too, Jeff. If you remember,
we were going way long,
way long.
And you said something earlier about these were big productions. I mean, I was always in two places, because I wanted to be you. I wanted to be the guy on the stage, and in fact, at one point, you were starting to groom people to assist you with that, and I was going to be one of those people. But I used to sit there, absorbing everything I possibly could and eating up the moment, but also going, God damn, I wonder how much it costs him to do this, and how much money is he making on this? And you and I talked very briefly before we got on this live call. I remember one where you walked on the stage, and I think that was Modern Magic, and I'm pretty sure there were about 500 people there, and you walked on with a big old snake on your neck, and I said, God damn, is that cool? Until you told us what was happening. Behind us, you had brought in rows and rows of tables covered with, I think it was white tablecloths. And at one point, you had the tablecloths pulled away, and they were terrariums filled with snakes. And then I got a little bit nervous. And then you explained, not only do you have a snake around your neck, but guess what you guys are going to do, us guys in the audience? You are now going to reach your hand into that terrarium of snakes, because at the bottom of it, there's a key. And I think you might have called it the key to your life. And then I got really nervous, because I'm not terrified of snakes, but touching them is just not my favorite. I love dogs. I don't mind cats, but snakes, that's not my idea of a good time. But, out of my belief in you and my trust of you, and the knowledge that, James is going to provide, I'm going to get something great out of doing this. Otherwise, James wouldn't have me doing it. And I knew, at least I believed, you wouldn't put me into a situation where I was reaching my hand into venomous snakes. And
no, none of them were poisonous.
I didn't think so. And
but they were scary though.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
And I still have this. I don't know how long ago with that, probably 10 years ago or something like that. I still can't have this. It sits on my wall every day, and I look at it as a reminder that you can do anything. I can still remember that the woman right behind me broke down in tears. She just couldn't do it, and a bunch of us hugged her, and she actually did. And so it's that you were spending tons. I'm assuming you were making a bunch of money off it, because you were living pretty high off the hog for a while, but you were giving this amazing value to tens of thousands, maybe millions of people who were just loving you all over the place. Now, I want to come to another subject. You wrote a book that I held up earlier. This is not your most current book, but Harmonic Wealth. And in Harmonic Wealth, you talk about that balance is bogus, and that harmony is what we should be striving for. And that's kind of in line with what my coach, my current coach, Liz Bentley, who's amazing, talks about. And you even said it before, that you really should be seeking fulfillment instead of happiness. Happiness is transitory. So can you talk a little bit about why balance and bogus is and harmony is what we really should be striving for?
Yeah, I'd love to. Again, I used the word pathology earlier, and I'll use it again. I believe that this whole idea that I want to find balance, and there's a lot of people out there, get balanced. I'm so balanced. Let me have a balanced life. Well, here's why I say it's bogus. And it creates a lot of pathology and a lot of guilt. Because if you look at a scale in perfect balance, and if you can visualize one of those old scales that has a pillar up the middle and it's got chains and there's two plates. Well, a scale in perfect balance, Jeff, what's happening here right now?
What's happening? It's homeostasis. They're equal.
Homeostasis. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. In perfect balance, nothing happens. And you said homeostasis. Absolutely. See, life is not like that. Life is dynamic. And so I chose to, I set these really big intentions. And when I wrote Harmonic Wealth, I wanted to redefine the word wealth for the world. Did I achieve that objective? No. But I'd rather go big than not go at all. So because most people, when they hear the word wealth, they instantly answer money. Well, wealth traced back to its origins. You say the etymology literally translates as well-being. And so harmonic wealth is about harmony and well-being in all areas of your life, and understanding that life is not homeostasis. Life is dynamic, and in that book, I talk about what I call the 5 pillars: financial, relational, mental, physical, spiritual. And when all those are in harmony, not balance, because perfect balance is not achievable. I don't care who it is or what they're talking about. Even the ones who talk about perfect balance are not perfectly balanced. It's like standing on a tightrope. The gentleman's balancing on the tightrope is balancing, quote, but what's he doing? It's dynamic. He's actually harmonizing on the tightrope because he knows he's got to go this way and go this way. And so what I encourage people to do is to look at the 5 key areas of life. And I still do this to this day. And my wife and I both do it together: financial, relational, mental, physical, spiritual. And say, what am I going to do? And what am I going to achieve in all of those 5 areas? Because how many people, let's go back to 2020. How many people invested all their time, energy, and their life in a business that was shut down in a nanosecond? And now, guess what? They're overweight. They're not very healthy. Their relationship is on the rocks because all they've done is work. Their spiritual connectivity is non-existent. And I could go on, but I think you get the point. This is rampant in the world. You want to talk about a pandemic? That's the pandemic. It is the pandemic of myopia, where we're only looking at one thing and saying, I've got to do this. I've got to have this. And it's part of the great lie, what I call the great lie that we've been programmed into in our current world, is that if you make more money, it's going to bring you more meaning. And yet it doesn't work that way. And research posted in Time magazine years ago proved that once you make about $75,000 a year, anything above that doesn't make you any happier, any more fulfilled. Now, you might have more stuff, but stuff doesn't make you happy and fulfilled either. And anyone who's gone out and got a new car or bought a new house, and I'm not anti those things, but what I am pro is that we understand what we're really after. What we're after is fulfillment and harmony in all of those areas. So, my wife and I had a killer workout this morning. And so we're taking care, we work with a trainer on Fridays, and we're taking care of the physical body. And we're going to have a date night tonight. So we're going out for a nice dinner. That's our date night. That's our relationship. In the meantime, I'm interviewing with you, and I'm taking care of this business. We have a corporate contract that we're working on, and we're going to be doing that. So we don't let anything slide. Now, as I say that, it's not one for one. Just because you spend 9 hours, 10 hours, sometimes 16 hours, frankly, if you're an entrepreneur in your business. My wife and I spent 16 hours a day for the first 8 years, 7 years probably, rebuilding from bankrupt and flat, to where we are today. Well, we don't do that anymore. So, but even during that, it doesn't mean we have to spend 16 hours in the gym to be healthy. It doesn't mean we have to spend, 16 hours on a date to be in harmony. Where we run into problems is when we totally neglect one of the pillars. And when you totally neglect one of those, that's when the wheel, if you can imagine them as spokes, that's when the wheel collapses. And that's where we get into problems. I'll give you a quick story. I was talking to an investment advisor in New York City a few years ago, and he was talking about hiring me as a coach. Very successful guy. And we met at a bar during happy hour in Manhattan. Not my favorite choice, but that was his choice. It was downstairs from his Wall Street office. So we met him there, and he was severely overweight and, drinking drinks, which is okay if that's what you want to do. And yet I started questioning him. Well, how often do you exercise? He's like, man, I'm too busy. I don't have time to exercise, but I do walk from the subway to my office every day. I'm like, well, that's good. It's good that you're doing that, and probably need to do some more. We were talking about a lot of different things, and he didn't hire me because he wasn't hearing, I guess, what he wanted to hear. Well, unfortunately, fast forward now a few months later, and he had a heart attack, and he's no longer with us. So the point is that anything that is totally neglected is going to become the weakest link, and it's going to come back to haunt you. So, financial is important. I'm always going to say it's important. It's 1/5 of the equation. So you look at your finances, you do look at your expenditures, you do look at managing your money, but that's just 1/5 the equation. And then you look at your relationships, and that's business relationships. And going back as a, let me just say this for your sales professionals, your ears will outsell your mouth every day of the week. The greatest tool of influence is asking great questions and really listening to the answers. And then when you can, and I'll give you another one, I'll take a little tangent here, but people invest in the emotional appeal of a future outcome. When you can listen to your relationships, whether it's a prospect, it also has marriages and romance and every relationship, business relationships, all of them. When you can listen and understand some of what they value, well, values are emotional for all of us. And so now you can correlate your product or service and the outcome of that product or service to the emotional appeal that they're looking for. They're going to want to do business with you. And so that's part of harmonic wealth. And then, so you got the financial, relational, and then you got the mental. Well, what happened in 2020? So many people had not developed the mental toughness and the emotional strength to weather through a storm. And I know storms, Jeff. I mean, and it's not easy. And I will never minimize you as a viewer today, your storm. And yet storms come. None of us is immunized to that. And so you've got to develop the mental toughness and the emotional strength. And that's not just intellect. That's EQ, emotional intelligence. AQ is a big one, adaptability intelligence, which research now proves that AQ, adaptability, and EQ, emotional intelligence, far and away more predictive of life and business success than IQ ever will be. And yet we live in a world that's all focused on IQ and how smart I am. So that's the whole mental game as well. So you got financial, relational, mental, physical. Let's just face it, if you're an entrepreneur today, it takes a lot to build and run a business. You're going to have good physicality. Now, I'm not talking about Instagram abs. I'm talking about just health and vitality and a strong body. And so that's the physical aspect of wealth. And then finally, spiritual. And I can't define that for you. And it doesn't matter because I'm not qualified to define it for you, but it goes for you to define your connectivity to something bigger, something more meaningful than the day-to-day routine. And that goes all the way back to how I got through my dysfunctional vacation, was by finding meaning and purpose And that pulled me through. Well, that's a spiritual pull, that says, hey, there's a purpose in this. And people say to me, well, James, didn't you just make it up? Yeah, maybe, but it worked. So I don't really care. Make it up if you have to, but if it works, it works.
Yeah, well, most people call that spiritual thing God. I don't. I call it the universe. But it's all the same thing. And there are a couple of things in there that so stick out for me. One is I have a high IQ. I was a member of Mensa. It never made me a penny. I've struggled financially for much of my career. It was that you're so smart, but you're full of potential and you're not making it. It's a IQ, nothing, almost nothing to do with it. And the other thing is, money does not make people happy. I don't know that Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk are any happier than I am. I'm a pretty damn happy guy. They have better toys, more toys, but happier? I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think that money allows you to have less stress. And I'm not sure if that's 75,000. Actually, that could be right. Knock on wood, I make a couple of bucks, but more than that. But I think when your basic needs are covered, if the rent is going to get paid or the mortgage, and you've got enough food, and you can go out every once in a while, how much happier is it going to make you? Because you're in a Learjet. I mean, I've never been in one, but I guess it's nice. But you also said something which struck me. It's all transitory. I like my car. Every time I get into it, I'm like, I love my car. And about 2 minutes later, I'm not thinking about I love my car. I'm thinking about, are the cops behind me because I'm speeding? And it's all transitory. Oh, I can't believe we're running out of time. There's 75 more questions. I'm going to go with this one. You're a masterful storyteller. I mean, I've literally sat in audiences just going, oh my God, I hope he never stops telling this story. In fact, one sticks in my mind, and I have no clue what the moral of the story was, but it was when you were at Machu Picchu, and I think you're laying on a slab in the rain, and your shaman is, I mean, masterful. I mean, you were very physical in the story. I think it went on for like 40 minutes, and there was never a second when I was like, I'm fucking bored. It's like, holy shit, keep going, James. So storytelling, in my opinion, is an important part of being a salesperson. I believe salespeople have to paint a picture in people's minds of them already having their product or service so they can feel the benefit, and that they have to tell what I call a verbal proof story, which is a story about somebody else like you, by doing business with me, lived happily ever after. So before we end, any tips on being a better storyteller? Because you're amazing at it.
Well, thank you for the compliment. That means a lot to me. And I've worked really, really hard at it. And the greatest tip, no one's ever asked me this question. So congratulations. It's a great question. And I agree with you. Storytelling changes the world. It really does. Storytelling builds the world. If you look at history, it's all a story. And it's only the story that was told by the victor. It's never the complete story. And who knows what that is. But the whole world is built on story. And so the first thing I would say, and I did a Facebook Live this week, and I'll reflect back on that topic I was getting across, is that it has to be your story. It has to be uniquely you. And I've had some incredible experiences, Machu Picchu you mentioned, and I've been to the Amazon and so many different things. And sometimes, my wife has even said to me, are those stories really real, or did you make them up? I'm like, no, honey, they're real. I mean, they're my stories, because sometimes they're just so, I'm telling you, I spent the night in Moses' cave on Mount Sinai. I mean, I've done some pretty incredible things. And so they're mine, though. And so many people I see in today's world are trying to knock off someone else. And if you attempt to knock off someone else, you're going to just be a cliche. That's all you are. And God bless you, but it's got to be uniquely yours. And then what you've got to be able to do is you've got to think about, here's where my story starts. What did I learn? And as a person of influence or a sales professional, here's where the story starts. And there's got to be tension. It's like the hero's journey. If you know Joseph Campbell, there's got to be in a great story, and any great story or great movie has this hero's journey in it. There's this idealism where you start off and you've got this grand idea and you're going to change the world, or you're going to do something big. And then you go off on this adventure and you face the dragon and you almost die. Invariably the dragon beats the crap out of you and you think you're not going to make it, but by the skin of your teeth, you make it and you emerge with this new learning, or you emerge with this gift to give to the world. And you say, well, James, how do I do that in sales? Well, it's easy, because it's not easy, but it's a format. If you can understand big idealism, dragon, emerge with a gift. If you can remember that, then you go, okay, big idea. I wanted to grow my business. And I went off and I looked for the systems and the tools and the strategies to do that. And I bought this copier. That just came out of nowhere. I bought this copier and it was total crap. And I spent all this money, and now I didn't have any money left because I spent way too much, and I got sold a bill of goods. And now I can't, my office can't run copies anymore, and we can't do this and that. And so there's tension there. And now what happens is I learned that, guess what? Copiers are kind of passe anyway. And now I'm doing something completely different. And here's the great gift I have for you. And this is what's worked for me, and as well as many of my clients. It can be much better. But if you understand that format, and then the third thing I'll tell you, uniquely you, and the 3 steps with tension, the idealism, the tension, the dragon, and the outcome or the gift. And then the third thing is you got to practice. You just got to practice. Practice is not something that you do to become great, just to become great. Practice is something that you do when you're already great to become greater. Like the last live event I've done, I spoke up in Canada in December of 2019 because everything was gone in 2020. And that's the last live event. I was hired to come up and do a presentation there. 90-minute presentation, Jeff. And my wife and I do this together because you'll remember we do a lot of media and such. Well, she's really gifted in that area. So she does all the audio and all the media and so on and so forth. And we put 100 hours of practice into that 90-minute presentation, because that's what the audience deserves. Now, I've been doing this since all the way back at AT&T in the 80s, doing sales training. I've been doing this for a long time. And so I could say, well, I'm already a great storyteller and I'm already good at what I do. So I don't really need to do that. But no, that's disrespectful. When you're getting in front of a client, a prospect, an audience, they deserve your best. And you've experienced it. I mean, those events that we used to put on, first of all, you made reference to, some of them cost $250,000 to produce. And so the margins were slim on a lot of them, because I wanted to provide so much sensory data and so much value and so much emotion that people would open up their intellectual barriers and maybe be open to considering something bigger, better, and greater. And we would do dress rehearsals, for hours the night before. And I don't know, I think you attended Quantum Leap. You remember the whole Matrix gig we did. I mean, we would run through that and I go, stop. Okay, you got to hit the lights right at this very moment. And that's what you have to do as any person of influence, whether you're on stage or whether with a prospect. So much of what I see, Jeff, in today's world is just get up on stage. Oh, I'm a speaker. Get up on stage and just flow of consciousness, just whatever, blah, 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 blah. Well, to me, okay, God bless you. In my world, that's disrespectful. And if I'm going to show up with my prospect or with my audience, I'm going to give it everything I got. I don't care, when I'm 85 years old, I'll still be doing that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And those events were amazingly produced from the moment the doors opened and the music was blasting, which I'm pretty sure it was your brother who was the DJ. It was everything. And there was dancing going on, and there were you and the girls up on the stage. And I always wanted to be up there with you, but it was amazing from start to finish. And there was a lot of stuff. It was incredible. I miss it. And I can't tell you, James, what this means to me. I don't think that the people who are watching can understand this, but You're very special to me. I can't thank you enough. How can people reach you, James, if they're interested in attending your seminars, your workshops, private coaching? How can somebody get in touch with you?
Well, the very best way is my website, which is really easy. It's just jamesray.com. I think that's how you got in touch with my office. And all of our events, we have upcoming events calendar there. Everything's on Zoom right now, which makes it really accessible for people all over the world. And my coaching opportunities are there. We have online video programs and products and so on and so forth. So jamesray.com. And then I'm obviously on Facebook, which is just James Arthur Ray, pretty easy to find. Twitter is James A. Ray, and I'm on LinkedIn. I was on Instagram, but my Instagram account just got mysteriously taken down in this climate that we're in, and my team is trying to figure out why, and they're just saying, well, you didn't comply with community standards. Well, what are community standards? I don't know. No one wants to tell us what that means, but it's the nature of the game we're in right now. So I'm not on Instagram anymore. We may open another account if we can't chase it back down, but I am on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. And then of course, jamesray.com is home base.
JamesJamesRay.com. And that is how I contacted you. And I can't tell you how stunned I was when I got a reply saying, yes, James would like to do this with you. I'm so grateful. And thank you just so much for everything, for today, for all the things that you've shared with me over the years. And it's really an honor for me. I don't know if you, I always wonder how the people kind of like you, who I hold in incredibly high regard, if you actually realize, what you mean to people like me. In fact, one of my idols is Paul McCartney. And I've often thought of, if I ever had a chance to talk to Paul, I'd say, do you really understand what you mean to people like me? I mean, the difference you've made in my life. So thank you so much for today and for everything, James. I truly appreciate it. And as I always end these, please, you guys, remember that sales is a game of making things happen. So get out there and make sales happen. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. God bless. Keep doing great work, Jeff.